Hello, this is Mike Fauché, and back in May of last year, I did a video on the UGreen DXP4800 Plus. At that time, it was a brand new device with fantastic hardware and a new operating system. Though it was missing some features in the early introduction, it was excellent hardware offered at a very competitive price. Fast forward to today, and UGreen has released multiple updates to their OS. So in this video, I want to compare their latest offering to Synology's DSM to see if this is a worthy alternative. Watch the rest of this video to see the side-by-side comparison, and if you find this video useful, please don't forget to like and subscribe, as it really does help support the channel. Full disclosure, as I mentioned in past videos, there were gaps between UGOS and Synology's DSM, so UGreen did sponsor this video so I could revisit this topic with their latest release. They have not limited or influenced this video, so the topics, opinions, and results are my own. However, they did review it for accuracy just prior to release. A special thanks to UGreen for sponsoring this video today. In order to put a realistic perspective on this video, I tried to come up with some topics that I thought would make a good comparison. I came up with a list of basic tasks that I think that most users need and expect from a NAS, and do a side-by-side comparison with both operating systems. This is in no way a full list of features, as my main objective was to try to be as realistic as possible and look at what I thought the majority of home users would need in a NAS. For this comparison, I'll try to cover the basic features and settings, shared folders and permissions, creating users, taking a quick look at the most used apps such as Photos, Backup, Dockers, VMs, and media servers. I won't go into full hardware comparison, however, here's an overview of the 4800 Plus, in the event you are not aware of it, and I will link to the original review I did on the DXP 4800 Plus in the video description, should you want to check it out. In addition, I'll also link to their hardware compatibility list, as UGreen offers extensive support for various brands of memory, SSD drives, and hard drives. Let's start by taking a quick look at the differences in the control panels. Looking at the screen, you can see that they have a very similar look, however they've taken a different approach. DSM appears to have included direct access to more features, however, as we'll see when we drill down, most of these features are found in UGOS, but they're nested within other features. Let's start by creating a simple file share with DSM. From the file station, select Create Shared Folder, give it a name and description, assign it a volume if you have more than one, and optionally disable the recycle bin. On the next screen, you have an option to encrypt the folder, which I'll skip for now. The next two screens we can skip and leave the defaults. Next, we're prompted to set user permissions, and once we select these permissions, the share is created. Let's repeat the same process using UGOS. From the Files app, select the plus icon and select Create a New Shared Folder. Give it a shared name, select the volume if you have more than one, and again, optionally disable the recycle bin. The next screen will prompt you for folder permissions, and click OK when you're done. As you can see, creating a share in most cases is more direct with UGOS. However, there's one key feature missing, and that's encryption. This feature is promised in a future release, however, currently it's not available. Next, let's create a user. Starting with DSM, select User and Group from the control panel, create user, type in a name and optional description, optional email, and create and confirm the password. Next, optionally add the user to other groups and give the user access to any of the shared folders they need. On the next screen, you can set a quota to any of the folders, and following that, you can assign a user-specific app permissions should you need it. On the next screen following that, you can set application-level bandwidth limits, and on the last screen has an overview of the settings, and you click Done when you're completed. Now let's create a user using UGOS. From the control panel, select User Management, click Add and select Create, enter the username and password, and verify the password. On the next screen, you can assign folder permissions, and once you hit Done, the user is created. As you can see, there are fewer steps, and some of the features are left out, so let's examine if you're giving up anything. UGOS doesn't prompt you for groups, and if you use groups other than default user, it's supported, but it's a separate step. In UGOS, quotas are assigned to shared folders. UGOS does not set up app-specific permissions or quotas to users. For me, this has been an issue. It's not a feature that I use even on DSM. So you'll have to decide if this feature is actually important to you. Next, let's take a quick look at some of the more common settings to see if there's any differences and omissions. Starting with DSM, let's select File Services from the control panel. Here we have multiple tabs across the top, starting with SMB, which is on by default. And on this screen, you can set the workgroup name, enable logging under advanced sections. You can set the minimum and maximum levels of the SMB protocol. Under the Mac OS tab, you can enable Mac-specific features. And looking across the top at the tabs, you can enable the AFP, NFS, FTP, and rsync functions. Under the Advanced tab, you can enable Time Machine if you're a Mac user. Now let's take a quick look at UGOS. From the control panel, we can go to File Services, and across the top we have a very similar tab layout with SMB, FTP, NFS, rsync, WebDAV, and Advanced settings. Selecting Advanced under SMB, you can set many of the same options as DSM, and you can enable FTP and NFS, which are off by default, and you can enable Ugreen to use rsync. Under Advanced settings, you can enable Bonjour and use the device as a Time Machine target. In my opinion, the file services are on par between the two, with the only difference being where the features are nested. Again, starting with DSM, looking at the networking from the control panel, clicking on Network, we have multiple tabs across the top. And starting from the general page, we have several settings, including the ability to change the server name, changing the default gateway, DNS servers, and advanced features like connecting to a proxy server. Looking at the Network Interface tab, you have a listing of network interfaces as well as the ability to create virtual networks and to bond network interfaces together. Under Traffic Control, you have the option of setting rules and control bandwidth for all ports or specific applications. Looking at the Ugreen network options under the control panel, we see a very similar setup. Under General, we have the ability to change the gateway, configure the DNS server, and enable multiple gateways. Under Network Connections, you can create a link aggregation or a bond, and of course set a specific IP address. Under the Data Control, you can limit the bandwidth of a service that's running. There are many more settings in this section, and the DSM does have more granular options in several areas. However, again, you have to ask if these are something that you need or they're important in your environment. For how I configure things in my network, as well as my opinion on how most home users set up their devices, there isn't really anything missing from UGOS that would really be an issue, as it provides all the basic functions and configurations that you would need in a typical setup. Next, let's take a look at the DSM security settings. This is an area where Synology arguably sets the bar, so let's go through some of the options. On the Security tab, you have some settings that are mostly related to browser security and the setting for the lockout timer, as well as a couple of other login settings. Under Account, you have the ability to enable two-factor authentication and some advanced features such as adaptive, MFA, and below that they offer account protection. Under the Firewall tab, you can enable the firewall and create rules to protect your device. Under the Protection table, you have all the auto block settings to prevent brute force attacks, the option to enable denial of service protection. On the next tab, you have Certificate Management, and under Advanced, you can set the TLS and SSL settings and optionally enable Spectre and Meltdown protection. The last tab is for Remote Key Management and creating a Remote Key Management server. Next, let's look at the Ugreen, where we have a similar look. So let's go over what's there and see if there's anything missing. Under Security, we have the general settings with all the lockout options, the ability to enable denial of service. You have the auto block settings. Under Advanced, you have the additional settings including enabling TLS and setting minimum levels. Under Account Security, you have the basic ability to enable two-factor authentication, and you have the account activity where you can look and manage the users that log into the device. Under Firewall settings, you have the ability to enable the firewall, just as you did with DSM, and create firewall prevention rules to protect your device. In the last tab, you can manage your certificates. The security settings is one area where there is more granularity in the DSM version. The kind of granularity settings in the Synology are typically reserved for specific use cases, and in my opinion, the majority of users use the defaults, which are set very well on both devices. Again, you'll have to decide if you need these extra settings and if they're important to you. The main level of security is typically how you connect to your NAS and the need to access it, so we'll cover that later on in this video. Now that we've seen a basic overview of the settings, let's dive into some of the more popular apps that are often used or needed on our NAS devices. Most people that buy a single NAS want it to do multiple things ranging from data storage, backup, media servers, as well as using it as a home lab. In addition, most users want to be able to securely access their files and apps when they're away from their networks. Some things to keep in mind: just because an app is available on a platform doesn't mean it'll run well. For example, any NAS can install Plex or a media server, but if your NAS doesn't have an Intel chipset or it's starving for RAM, transcoding files to stream remotely will not be a great experience. This also affects things like Docker containers and VMs. You should still consider the hardware you buy before buying it. Many users are buying something like a low-end NAS with an ARM-based processor and later get frustrated when it performs poorly on their Plex server application, Docker, or VM. Looking at the amount of apps between the two, you can see that natively there are more in the Synology App Store than there is with the Ugreen. However, keep in mind that most apps are available to be installed as a Docker container, though it may take a little bit more to set up. To help quantify this for most users, I made a list of the common apps or features that I use on a daily basis to see how each would be implemented. We'll go through each and see if it's available natively, and if not, did it successfully install as a Docker container. Starting with Home Assistant, which is a critical part of my use case, searching in the Synology Package Center, the app isn't available as a native app. However, I was able to successfully install the Docker version, and it worked perfectly without any issues. On the Ugreen, the app does show up as a native app, though it's actually installed as a Docker app. They have simplified the install process, so it appears to run as a native app. Next was Tailscale. I've done many videos on Tailscale, and it's currently the only VPN that I use. As I mentioned before, I don't use any of the Cloud Connect applications from either Ugreen, Synology, or QNAP, as I don't want that many variables in my network. Regardless of whose service is better, I don't use any of them, and I route everything through Tailscale. Let me know in the comments below if you want to see a video on setting up Tailscale on the Ugreen device, and I'll do a separate video on it. Going over to the Synology Package Center and searching for Tailscale, you find the application, which quickly installs and you have it running. Going to the App Center on UGOS, the native app isn't available. However, I was successfully able to install it as a Docker container. As you're creating your settings in Docker, the Docker version has more features, such as network routing and exit nodes. It would be nice that it was available as a pre-configured app like Home Assistant, but it worked great overall. Next, let's try Plex. Like Tailscale, a native app is available on DSM, but not on UGOS. You have to install it as a Docker container. One of the main things to consider here is that many of the Synology units are ARM-based or AMD-based, so hardware transcoding isn't available built into the app. That's okay if you're just streaming to your local network. However, real-time transcoding for remote viewing isn't not a great experience. As the current Ugreen devices are based on Intel chips with support for QuickSync, transcoding is extremely smooth and easily streams 5 to 10 streams at the same time. If you're a JellyFin user, it's reversed. The native app is not available in the Synology Package Center. However, it does install easily as a Docker container. In the UGOS App Store, it does show up as a native app, and like Home Assistant, it's actually a pre-packaged Docker container. As I'm currently not a JellyFin user, I don't have any comments on how it performs or the features it has. Looking at Emby, the app is available as a native app in the Synology Package Center, and on UGOS, you do have to set it up as a Docker container. Again, since I'm not an Emby user, I don't have any comments on features or performance. Since we've been discussing Docker containers, let's just quickly review it to see if there's any differences, as they look very similar. Both have an overview, a project tab for creating a container project, a container tab that shows your current containers, and a local image list of your images. To search and download images is done by going to the image database on UGOS with a dedicated tab on the container manager. Both have a network tab and a tab for logs. Differences are mainly in organization, as both have the same feature set and both work extremely well. Many new users will not use VMs, but let's quickly go through it as it's a powerful tool that you'll want to use in the future. There is a big difference between each company's approach. Both are easily able to create a virtual machine, and the DSM VM Manager allows you for snapshots and the ability to create clusters. Because of my test unit, I couldn't actually verify a typical Windows install as it didn't have enough RAM built into the unit. On UGOS, the process is more simplified, and I was easily able to create a Windows VM. UGOS does support snapshots, however, it doesn't support clusters. The takeaway here is that both do the same basics of what the majority of the users need. However, though the app on the DSM does have more advanced features, even basic features can't be used with their lower-end hardware. So again, select your hardware carefully so you're not limited by the hardware itself. Moving on to the Photo app, let's quickly go over the basic features of each. Synology Photos does a good job in displaying your photos in a timeline. It has some filters that allow you to filter by type, date, geolocation, and ratings. On the left tab, you have the basic features such as the Album tab that creates default albums as well as allows you to create custom albums, and a Sharing tab that allows you to share photos as well as create a location for others to share photos with you. Looking at the Ugreen version of the Photo app, you have a similar timeline view of your library. Across the top, you have very similar features as the DSM has. Over on the right, you have the ability to add, change your thumbnail size, change the view type, and you have some filters that allow you to filter items much like the Synology has. Across the top, you have the album view, and you have a tab called Tools. Under Tools, you have some powerful options that are not available on the Synology. Ugreen provides you with an AI learning model that allows you to import custom learning models and, more importantly, train your own models. Training a new model does require that you download some training packages such as people recognition, text recognition, duplicate photo recognition, scene and object recognition, pet recognition, potential sensitive content, image recognition, and model training. To demonstrate how this works, let's search for several items and see how it performs. I currently have over 7,100 photos in my Photos folder. I didn't do any trading, tagging, any prep work of any kind on these images other than enable the AI tools. Typing in cake in the search tool, you can see the word comes up with the AI logo next to it. Clicking on it starts the search of my photo library and finds all the photos that I have cake in. Given the amount of photos, the search is really quick and does a good job finding the photos I wanted. For contrast, I tried searching for vehicle, and again it did a great job locating a variety of vehicle pictures. Next, I tried something like computers, and it did a good job finding images even when the images were only a portion of a laptop that was showing. For my last search, I searched for pools, and again it quickly pulled up images containing photos with pools in it. With any of these searches, you can easily select the files and add them to an album. I was impressed at how well it worked. Like any other AI-enabled app, it's not 100%, but I found it to be just as good as anything else I've tried, and it makes quick work of organizing your files into albums or just simply looking for something in your collection. There's a ton of features here that we won't cover in this video. However, let me know in the comments if you want a dedicated video on this Photos app. Lastly, let's look at the state of backups on both devices. To start with, let's look at a typical scenario to see how each is handled. We could dedicate an entire video to backups, but we'll try to keep it simple for the purpose of this video. I usually break down backups into several categories. The first is the ability to back up your PC to your NAS. The second is to back up your NAS to another device, external USB or cloud drive, and the third is file syncing. If we look at the Synology App Store, there's a bunch of choices, but the main ones are Hyper Backup and Active Backup for Business. Looking at Hyper Backup, it's aimed at backing up your NAS device, offering a wealth of options ranging from their own cloud service, remote NAS, local drive, and a wealth of third-party services. If we look at Active Backup for Business, you can back up all your client PCs and other NAS devices, servers, and VMs. If we jump over to the UGreen OS, the approach is a bit different. Ugreen also uses two applications. The first is the sync and backup applications. Looking at the left tab, you can create a sync job allowing you to sync files between multiple PCs and your NAS. In order to use the sync, however, you have to download their client application to those devices in order for this to work. This works great for PCs, Macs, and mobile devices, but syncing to USB or a different NAS is somewhat limited. In most cases, this isn't a huge impact. However, it would be nice if they added this feature in the future. So using the backup is a bit different in that you can create a backup job to another UGreen NAS, any rsync supported device, which opens up many more options, and a local drive or a PC or Mac. In terms of backup, it does everything that you need it to do, and from my use, it's a pretty robust application. Last is the Cloud Drive. The Cloud Drive app on the UGOS works really well, but it's currently limited to OneDrive or Google Drive. Hopefully they'll add more services in the future. Choosing a NAS involves careful consideration. While operating systems evolve and continue to add new features over time, your hardware selection typically is a more permanent decision. When comparing a UGreen NAS, which is relatively new, to an established competitor like Synology, there are some trade-offs. You might forego some of the advanced features that are not often used with UGreen for now, but you gain superior hardware at a much more attractive price. As of this video, a UGreen NAS can easily handle most of the user needs. The well-implemented Docker allows you to install powerful third-party applications such as Nextcloud, Tailscale, Plex, or SyncThing, which can expand the capabilities and know that your hardware will support it. From a hardware perspective, UGreen provides a more powerful platform, frequently featuring Intel processors, faster networking, and NVMe support. Equally as important is their extensive hardware compatibility list, allowing flexibility to use a wide range of SSDs, memory, and hard drives. I'll post a link to their hardware compatibility list in the video description. I've been genuinely impressed with UGreen's progress with their OS over the past year. Their system is now smoother, more polished, and any of their initial shortcomings have been addressed. Given their rapid update cycle, I'm confident they'll continue to improve and add features, further closing any gaps with the competition. In my opinion, their robust hardware platform and hardware compatibility provides a great foundation to address your home and small business needs. To make your decision a bit easier, UGreen is offering a 15% discount, so if you're in the market for a NAS, check the link in the description below for details. So that's about it for today's video, so please leave any questions below in the comments section and let me know what you're using and the type of applications that you run. A special thanks to UGreen for sponsoring this video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.